Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Breck Roll. Alright, I got a little project I gotta do, and well, just let me get down to it and show you what we're talking about. When I was in junior high, I took metal shop. Now I know in hindsight I probably should have taken wood shop. That probably would have been a better mix for me. But at the time I didn't know I'd get into wood the way I did, and so I took metal shop. Well, so we made a bunch of metal projects, and one of those things that I made was a screwdriver, and this is, well, that screwdriver. Now, I didn't do a very good job at it. It turned out the metal we used wasn't hard enough, and ultimately the tip ended up bending and then breaking off at one point. So it's been a virtually useless part of my tool collection ever since then. It's been just sitting in my tool chest. Now, I kind of began repurposing it a couple years ago when I started doing Silo of Screams. Because, see, one of the best ways to scare people in a haunted house is to make a loud noise and then jump out. And what ended up happening is the first year I tried doing that with my voice. You'd jump out and go boo or rah or something like that. And found out that wasn't a good long-term strategy because I ended up trashing my voice when I did that. So after that, I began bringing this screwdriver with me. And I'd bang it on something and then jump out, and that would create a sharp noise and make everybody jump when they saw me appear. Well, I've continued doing that for the last couple years, and I brought it with me to Silo of Screams last night, and when I was banging on it, I literally broke it in half. And so I spent the rest of the night trying to make do with a piece of jagged metal that was in the haunt that I was in. Only to realize I didn't really want to do that because that jagged piece of metal, every time I banged it on something, it was going to start getting shredded and sharp edges on it, and I was going to tear up my hands before long. So I started thinking, you know what? I want to make something new to replace this thing. And I also then started noticing other things. One of the things that I ran into is, since this blade wasn't very long and it's really dark in there, and I'm not necessarily looking at what I'm hitting when I swing at it, on more than a few occasions last night, I misjudged the distance, and rather than hitting a piece of metal with a screwdriver, I ended up punching it with my fist. And so I got bruises and cuts on my hand as a result of that. So when I started thinking about rebuilding this, I said, you know what I want to do is make one that's heavier and longer. See, this blade is only about 6 or 7 inches long. So I figured I want something where the blade is 12 or 14 or 16 inches long, so that I can safely swing at it and be relatively sure that I'm not going to end up punching whatever it is I'm hitting. Because, like I said, I got a torn up hand right now because of that, and want to protect from that. So what I just did is went over to Home Depot. What I was actually thinking about was taking a piece of rebar, putting a handle on it, and using that. And I really wanted to find like a piece of 3/4 inch or 1 inch rebar, something really, really thick that would be heavy, and so I wouldn't have to put a lot of energy into it to swing it, and would also be long enough so that I could keep my hand safe when I did swing at something. And I couldn't find anything thicker than 1/2 inch rebar, and honestly, that isn't much thicker than this thing. So I was concerned about that. And so I started looking in other directions. I found some fence posts or something like that seemed to be 5/8 of an inch thick. But the problem with those, they had holes drilled in them, and that just seems like that's going to make it weak for me, weaker, and ultimately result in this thing being more likely to break again. So I went over to another section, and I found another piece of metal that I think I'm going to fashion into something that I can bang on things at Silo of Screams. And let me show you what that piece is. Alright, so here's what I found. This is a piece of solid steel. It's 5/8 of an inch diameter and 3 feet long. So this thing's perfect. It's a little too long. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it in half, and we're going to attach a handle to that, and that's going to be my new noisemaker at Silo of Screams. So let's get going on this. Now, one of the first things I noticed when I picked this thing up is it has kind of a greasy surface to it. I think they're probably doing that to keep it, since it's solid iron, they're doing that to keep it from rusting. But what I want to do is I'm going to attach some black duct tape. some really thick black duct tape to this to make the handle. And if I'm going to make that duct tape stick, I'm going to have to get this gunk off, because not only is it slippery and greasy, it also gets your hands dirty, and I don't want to have dirty hands every time I handle this thing. So first thing I got to do is clean it up. Alright, I spent a little time with some Formula 409 and some Ajax, and this is a lot better now. It isn't sticky anymore, and I think I'm going to have a lot better chance of making something stick to this. Now, what I think I want to do next is cut the thing in half. Now, this is like I said, this is a 5/8 inch piece of steel, so this isn't something you're just going to do with a hacksaw. But fortunately, I have the right tool for the right job. And that tool is this baby. You may recall that I bought this about 2 years ago when I was installing the cat shelves in the cat's room. The brackets that I was going to hang on the wall to hang the shelves on were a little too long, and I needed to cut them. I tried doing it with a hacksaw, but it just was taking forever. So I went and got this thing, and this thing, it was overkill for what I was using. But I figured, you know what, I'll use it, and this is the time where we're going to use it, and we're going to use it for what it's for. Now, I put a little mark on the bar that where I'm going to make the cut, and secured it with my vise. So basically, we're just going to go through this with a grinder. This should be like cutting through butter. Yeah, better than fireworks, right? Now there's still a little bit of a jagged edge on this, so I want to round that off because I don't want there to be any sharp edges where I or someone else could get hurt if they get bumped by it. So I'm going to use my nice little sander table here that I inherited from my father, and we're going to just kind of smooth off those edges a little bit. Alright, that looks way better. So much better. In fact, I think I'm going to actually do the other side. I kind of like the fact that it's a little bit rounded on this side. So I think I'm going to do this edge too, which is a little bit more square. Just make it round on both ends, right? No sharp edges. Alright, so I got both sides smoothed off really well, and I think this is pretty much ready to go. Now, the reason they put the oily stuff or the greasy or whatever stuff on it is to protect this, kind of prevent it from rusting. And I do sort of want to prevent this from rusting because I don't want to be swinging around a rusty tool and have that kind of thing. So what I think I want to do is protect this somewhat, but unfortunately it's not going to be really full-time protection, because what I'm thinking about doing is hitting it with some spray paint. And if I hit it with spray paint, what's going to end up happening is that as I beat it on things, the paint's going to chip off, and that just may be part of the maintenance of this thing, is that I got to repaint it every once in a while. But I think we're going to do that next, and I'm actually looking at something right now I have that I don't think I've ever used before, that I got a can of paint on, that I think it'll still make it look metal but still protect it. So let me show you what I got in mind. Alright, this is that Rust-Oleum stuff I've talked to you about. It's basically designed to prevent rust from building up on metal. And what you do is you clean the metal off and you hit it with this. And this has got kind of a hammered gray color to it. So it shouldn't actually change the appearance of this thing much, but it should protect it from rust. Now, it's something I'll probably have to reapply every year so it doesn't rust out on me on the off season. But I still think that this is going to be a good option. It'll look nice, and let's just do it here. kind of get it from every angle here. It is changing the appearance a little bit, but that's okay. It's going to be dark, right? Nobody's going to care. Okay, we're going to let that dry for a little bit. We'll see how that looks, and we may hit it with another coat in about an hour. I'll see you then. Alright, it's the next day. I let this thing kind of dry overnight because this stuff remains tacky for a while. You'll kind of touch it, it'll be sticky. But once it dries completely, there's no more stickiness to it all. It's nice and well coated now and ready to go on with the next step. Now, I understand the second I start beating this thing on pieces of metal, the paint's going to chip off. So I know that I'm going to probably have to repaint this thing every year just to kind of keep it good. But want to start it off looking good. And I think we're there now. Next step I want to do is I want to put the handle on it. And what I got is I got some black duct tape. It's a Gorilla tape. It's 4 inches thick, and I'm going to just kind of wrap it around a couple layers around this, and then we're going to do a few other things to make it more of a handle. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. Alright, so that's sort of the beginning of the handle. I've just kind of created a 6-inch long handle in it by wrapping this duct tape, this black duct tape around it, and it doesn't quite have the diameter that I want, but what I want to do is add a little texture to it that will make it easier to kind of grip onto. And so I'm going to do that actually with some 12 gauge wire, and I'll show you what I have in mind. Now, it might not be really clear what I did here, but basically I took a piece of 12 gauge wire and just kind of swirled it around the handle. And so that'll kind of create a little bit of texture when I'm holding on to it. Now I'm just going to put another few layers of the tape over that to hold everything in place, and we should pretty much be done. Alright, so there is the finished product, handle and all. It's got a nice little texture on it because of the wire I put underneath it, and I think this is going to do actually a really good job making a lot of noise at Silo Screams, because this thing is way heavier than the screwdriver I had. The screwdriver was maybe 2 or 3 ounces. This thing weighs a pound, and this is going to make a lot of noise when I bang on something metal. See what I mean? Yeah, so I think that is all that I have for today. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Good night. Now, 2 things I noticed after I did my little test striking of the fence here is, number 1, we actually ended up denting the pole with this thing, so that's good. Another thing I noticed is one of the problems I had with the screwdriver was that when you bang on something, the vibration of the impact tended to go up the screwdriver, and you felt it on your hand. There's such good padding on this thing, I did not even feel that impact. So that's also going to be a good thing in terms of reducing stress over the night, when you're banging on this thing over and over again, and you're not going to have the pain that kind of comes with doing that. So this thing's going to work really well, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this works next week at Silo Screams.